Today I'd like to talk to you about tactics in Philidor's defence. It's always nice, I think, to show groups tactics using a position that you know, and of course the start position is the easiest one of all. I think Tarash's trap is a super resource as well for coaches, but Philidor's defence is hard to beat. So let's have a look at how that goes. We start off with e4, e5, knight f3, and now knight c6 I'm pretty sure is the best reply, but sometimes you do see others, and Philidor's defence is d6. Now if you haven't seen it before, if you haven't, or at least if you haven't seen it for a while, have another think about this and what do you make of it? Does it look okay? Does it look rubbish? Is it your favourite? Never thought about it? You should always think about alternatives to obvious moves. Even if you play the move you did first think of, thinking helps you understand the position. There's actually got a lot going on here. So Philidor was the strongest player of his day, so it's probably not pointless. And since Philidor, it's not been played much and is not popular, so it might not be the best move. So what are the good and bad points about this move, and how should white reply? Anyhow, we can make some general waffle about the good and bad points about it, which are a guide. But to start off with, analysis is, position as a guide, analysis is proof. But of course, definitive analysis quite often is not possible. At some point, you have to stop analysing and make a judgment. But let's see if we can pick off some quickly. D4 is a move there's no harm in making at all. It's a good move. It prepares to develop the Queen's bishop, which stands in stark contrast to the limited scope available to the black bishop, and it puts black's centre under pressure. So we're threatening to take twice on e5 and win a pawn, and perhaps also displacing the the black king by capture of the queen. So we take. So forcing moves, we've got a threat, and so black's in a horrible mess here, and should do something about it. Well, what's available? I'll rewound a bit, and so in this position, how can black respond? There's a couple of queen moves to defend the pawn. The black knight can come from b8 to 2 squares to defend the pawn on e5. I suppose there's f6, which doesn't look right at all to me, but we can have a look. And there's actually a counter-attacking move. So black will say, well, if you can have my e pawn if you like, as long as I can have yours. So there's various sorts of defence moves and a counter-attack move. I often carve these things up into avoid, block, capture, defend and counter-attack, A, B, C, D, E, or A, B, C, D, X, I don't know. So there's a counter-attacking move there, and there is one other move which will stop white carrying out that threat, which is the not a capturing move but a pinning move against one of the pieces making the threat. So this bishop to g4 move is also worth a look. So that's what we'll be doing in bits over the next while, looking at all those different moves. If you like, you can stop and have a think about which one you'd pick and how you might deal with the rest. First of all, we can look at queen to f6. I don't know any way to prove a win for white here, but I can suggest that this is not likely to be very good. It puts the queen within reach of the white pieces, and it stops the black pieces coming to their best squares. This f6 square is a square that the knight might well prefer to be on. So I think just bishop to g5, and we needn't look any further. I don't think there's anything that black can do tactically to affect white, and that may be enough. Queen to e7. Well, I don't know any way to prove a win for white here, but I can again suggest we've made an extra problem for our bishop on f8, and as I say, it also brings it with a little bit of reach of white's pieces. So something like knight to c3 threatens knight to d5, and black will probably have to play c6. Now black's position is not falling apart, you know, we've got everything covered, but is passive, so again we might look further for the best move for black. The next move to consider is bishop to g4. I suppose I'm doing these in some sort of order of merit. So black pins the knight, so defending the threat, and develops a piece, so it looks a bit better than the queen moves, and this move was made in one of the best known games in chess history. I mean, I'm embarrassed to show you it again, but just to tell the story, the great American Paul Morphy was watching an opera, The Barber of Seville, and then two toffs interrupted him, and they wanted him to play him a game, and they made him sit with his back to the stage while they played a game against him. Anyhow, Morphy went through them like a knife through butter, winning in about 17 moves, so I hope he didn't miss too much of the opera. But let's see the start of it. How would you create problems for black here? Well, problems are likely to come around with forcing moves. So one idea for white here might be to take on e5, take on e5, take on d8, take on d8, all as planned. And actually, by now, the bishop isn't stopping us moving the knight at all. So that so black's idea isn't totally straightforward. There is an in-between move, so we don't have to capture straight back after d takes e5 for black. So black can play bishop takes f3, which solves the problem of losing a pawn. Takes and takes, and but now I think white gets a bit of an advantage by playing bishop to c4. 6 moves into the game, white's got the 2 bishops and a leader development, and is creating a bit of an attack down on f7, which may or may not be easy to meet. So again, I'd say bishop to g4 is probably not right, and that's the way to handle it if you are sorry, not right way to handle it if you're black, and that's the way to handle it if you're white. So amongst our choices of avoid, block, capture, defend, one of the ones I actually didn't put on the first video, I think, the first picture I think, is to play e takes d4. So that's avoiding the attack. It's not entirely logical, since having played 2d6 to support the pawn, we're now moving the pawn. So you wonder what that pawn on d6 is doing, but it's not entirely a bad move. Black is opening up the centre, and so should try and castle quickly on the king's side. And there are 2 lines, depending on how black intends to develop the king's bishop. Currently on f8 can either go to g6, which is going to cost another pawn move, or to e7, which is rather quiet. White normally recaptures on d4 with the knight, although as in the famous fake game Adams Torrey, queen takes d4 is another alternative. Knight c6, takes, just very natural developing moves from white, and white's got a healthy space advantage, although black's obviously solid there. Space advantages are the hardest sorts of advantage to take to make use of, because they don't really tell you what to do or where to go. But nonetheless, I think you'd prefer to be white there. After knight takes d4, we can play bishop to e7, and I guess the best moves for white here are something like knight to c3, bishop to f4, queen to d2, and castles long, making it into an opposite side castling game where white's going to have more space, and so you're giving yourself a bit of a head start. Along those lines, neither side have got any weaknesses, but white can hope to provoke some by playing moves like f3, g4, and so on, and trying to hack through on that king side. That's even more true in the other line. So instead of bishop to e7, we go g6, which is that's a great diagonal for the bishop, of course. But knight c3, the same sort of plan. Now after knight to c6, we've got a problem on d4, which we can solve by taking queen d2 and castles again. And here white's got a nice attacking formation, and actually you've got a little bit to nibble on in this position if you play h4 to h5, and you may be able to lever open the black king side in a familiar sort of attack that I hope you know how to play. So neither of those look entirely satisfactory for black, although I'll say not without weaknesses and with only space on your side. Still plenty of chess to play. So if e takes d4 is inconsistent, if you're trying to be consistent, perhaps trying to defend the e pawn in a different way, let's try knight to c6. I'm not quite sure what to recommend here. I mean, there are plenty of possibilities. I mean, just to grab a bit of space with d5 is perfectly okay. I mean, but I don't think youngsters should always play closed positions. So perhaps we can find something else. And I suspect the best one to try would be bishop to b5, which is a bit Rilo-Pezzy. Bishop to g4 isn't very satisfactory because of d takes e5, like in the Morphy game, and knight to c3 is also a possibility. Actually, no, knight c3 you get into trouble with taking on e4. That might be slightly awkward. So but after bishop to b5, I think that's renews the threat against the e pawn, and I'm not sure anything's terribly satisfactory for black here. Bishop to d7 or knight to f6 may lead to the old Steinitz variation of the Rye-Lopez, but usual sorts of things apply, that black's solid but you've got more space. So if moving the queen's knight to c6 isn't entirely satisfactory, this move, knight to d7, which is called the Hahn variation, defends the pawn. Bishop b5 isn't a problem. How about that as a solution? Well, white's best is undoubtedly bishop to c4, and this is a very interesting and important position. How should black reply? Well, answer it very carefully. Black, ironically, having played so very safe and solid all the way through this analysis so far, defending the pawn and being careful about being as solid as they possibly could be, is actually very nearly losing. It's not at all hard to find losing moves here for black. Being safe, quotes, with h6. There's a problem here with d takes e5, and if d takes e5, we have bishop takes f7 check, check, and now the black knight can't capture because the queen will be on prise. King to f6, queen to d4 with a deadly attack. Definitely worth trying out those. It's a very good teaching position, I think, to have a go at that. And if after the check the king goes backwards to say e8, then queen to h5 is going to push them out again, and we'll catch the king in the middle. So, quotes, being safe with h6 looks pretty dangerous. After d takes e5, you can take back on e5 with the knight, but takes and takes, and now if you followed the earlier analysis, you may well think, well, the easiest thing to do here is to play queen takes d8, king takes d8, and bishop takes, pawn up. Why not? But there's a common situation in chess where you've got a couple of ideas, swapping queens, taking on f7. Perhaps try them in a different order. You sometimes come up with something new and interesting. Sometimes the first order doesn't work, sometimes the second order is better. So let's try, knight takes e5, takes and takes. Well, instead of taking the queen first, can we take the f7 pawn first? And indeed we can, because the king, if takes the bishop, then we'll lose the queen. So black has to play queen to e7, and if we're interested to keep the queens on the board, we can do, or we could just take them off as before. And but this is now white's turn. So it's in the previous time we reached this sort of position, it was black's turn to move here. We just taken the pawn on f7, but now black's just taken the queen on d8, and it's our move, so we've gained a move. So what else could black do on move 4 here? There's a possibility of bishop to e7. Again, our favourite forcing move is strong. Takes, and there's the pawn recapture here is not best because of queen to d5, and now the attack on f7 is not easily blocked. Well, it can't be blocked at all, and neither can it be defended. So that's awful. D takes e5, knight takes e5, and following through forcingly, knight takes e5, d takes e5, and I wonder if you can spot the move here. Perhaps pause the video and have a think. Queen to h5 with a double attack on f7, and e5 wins a pawn and should win the game. That's all rather nice. If you hoped to win the pawn as in the previous line, you'll be disappointed. Queen takes d8, and now bishop takes d8, and of course black has the f7 pawn defended. So where else can we go for black? Instead of bishop to e7, that doesn't seem right. Another try here, which is reasonably often played, is c6, which is designed to stop the queen to d5 move that was so powerful last time. We can go forwards in several ways here for white. Knight to g5 might be a thing, and knight to h6. Having seen this, there's rather a sneaky move here, and a rather direct one. So there's the direct one is to play check, knight e6, and then you might fall as black for queen to e7 check and knight takes a8, when white has an exchange but may lose the knight. White's also managed to remove from the centre of play the only two pieces that we had developed, so that black may start coming forward faster now than they had have done, even if they hadn't fallen into, quotes, the trap. However, one of the ideas behind often playing c6 for black is another idea is to chase the bishop and be annoying with b5. So we can stop that with a4, which is obviously a decent idea, but there is another more subtle trap here. And if black plays bishop to e7, which I think 99 players out of 100 would play if they hadn't seen this position before, and we play bishop takes, knight e6 again, and now queen b6, as you might expect, a5, and if the queen moves to a6 or b5, we've obviously got a check on c7 to sort out, and that's what the pawn move was for. b6, a5, now queen to b4 check, bishop to d2, queen to c4, and knight to c7 check. Anyway, king to d8, and now b3 wins the queen because the b5 square is taken away from the queen by the knight. If after queen to bishop to d2, queen takes b2, then bishop to c3 just picks up the queen in a simple way. So that's rather nice. After knight to c3 on move 5 instead, bishop e7, a well-known line goes takes knight g5, and if knight to h6, knight e6 wins, takes, and queen to h5 check, king comes to f8, and bishop takes e6 is the way to win. So after takes and takes, knight to g5, bishop takes g5, and the right move here is queen to h5, and then black has to go, say, g6, takes and takes, and or queen to f6, bishop takes, and queen to h4. And in both of those lines we haven't won any material, but certainly white's got a very strong attack, and indeed there are two bishops. So there's two different approaches we could adopt there against c6. So what have we learned so far about this? It seems to me it's very surprising that how close black is to losing after those two slow moves early on of d6 and knight to d7. So if nothing else, you should have learned to be very careful before making, quote, solid moves and safe moves yourselves. Also, just generally, some quite good looking ideas have led to absolute disaster for black. So it's worth looking for wins right from the start in chess. So if your opponent plays an odd move, it may be possible to win straight away. So don't just carry on without thinking. I mean, that's a terrible thing to do in any area of life, let alone chess. And also we've met lots of little tactical ideas which are rather nice. So I think there are plenty of lessons here in looking at this, even if your opponents don't ever play Philidor's defence. So if not knight to d7, bishop c4, knight gf6 is the other move here that we can try, but I think again d takes e5, d takes e5, knight to g5 is awkward, and if d takes e5, knight takes e4, 5, takes and takes again, and bishop takes f7 check, wins a pawn. It's not quite as straightforward as in the last time we looked at this. Queen takes d8, and we've got a queen for a bishop, but black's go bishop to b4 check, retreat the queen, takes and takes, and we have a pawn and the same number of pieces as black. So this is nice. So that's the Hannum variation, which I think is not satisfactory for black at all. Another counter-attacking idea, which again I missed off the first splatter, is to play f5 here. White's tried many moves here, all of which I think are probably okay. Bishop to c4 is lively, d takes e5, or e takes f5. I think all of those are fine, but knight to c3 has got to be the most sensible. You know you want your knight there anyway. And if takes and d5, trying to get push the knights around, one idea is to play knight takes e5, and if they take the knight, queen to h5 check, with patterns that I'm sure you've seen before. If the if the pawn intervenes, then we can take with the knight, and black's in a certain amount of trouble here. So that's the Philidor counter gambit with f5. I'd actually quite like it if that worked. I've spent a long while looking at that in over the years, but I think it has to be called risky. So having got this far with all of those other moves, is there absolutely any way to defend this position for black? Well, it's the one last way of counter-attacking with knight to f6, and if knight to c3, knight to d7, we've got a Hannum sort of position, but where white has played knight to c3 instead of bishop to c4, and that extra move to get the black king side sorted. The knight c3 move being not so threatening as a move than bishop to c4 enables enables black rather to get sorted. So this improved Hannum defence, as it's called, is absolutely the best way to play this for black, and is the way that you should approach it. There are other move orders you can try and for black, for example, moving d6 on the first move instead of e5. So bishop to c4, bishop e7, and black's getting sorted. The attempt to refute the defence, if it is refutable, goes d takes, knight takes, and d takes, and you think, well, where is the refutation? That's all. Black is far from refuted there. Instead of taking on e5, bishop to e2 may be a try. White's certainly not worse here. And if after d takes e5, d takes e5, knight to g5, castles, and I don't know if this is up for much here. Takes on f7, takes on f7, knight d6 is an idea with queen e8, and knight takes a8 seems to be not so good because of something like b5 and bishop to b7. White's got nothing developed. The piece on a8 is going to be lost, we expect, and black's got lots of chances here. So I don't think this position after bishop e7 is refutable rather, and the way ahead may be to play castles, and then a4, anticipating clamping down on the black queen side after, or castles, rook e1 perhaps, and if c6 then a4. This is the sort of setup that is tended to be thought of as the main line here. After bishop e7, knight g5 directly is a try, but again I don't think black's in a huge amount of trouble here. I actually recommend, if black wants to play this, because I mean by this time we've got by the time we played that into this position, black's solid, maybe knows what they're doing, and it's not ever so easy to think about white having a plan other than to sit on it. So after d4, I rather like d takes e5 here, and if takes on e4, queen d5, and after knight to c5, bishop to g5, bishop e7 takes on d6, and I think this position is, however black decides to capture and where they decide to capture, I think white ends up with a small edge here. The pawn position tends to be symmetrical, but if the only thing going on is white's extra piece activity, then that's definitely good for white. So I think that's how to play that for white if black knows enough to play the improved Hannum. Anyhow, I hope point made. Openings can be very tricky. Quite a lot going on. Don't play them casually. Have a look for tactics all of the time, and please understand the moves that you make, so that if you ever see Philidor's defence trotted out with knight f6, well, why do they play knight f6? It's a half-hour story.